Before we get started, a quick reminder that we have our Sunday lecture series, Lynching in America, at noon Central Standard Time. And we also have a new lecture series coming up, Thursdays, Thursdays, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is the Great Migration, where we discuss the mass movement of a race of people, Black people, that changed the face of a nation, something that impacts us to this very day. It is a 4-part series that is $45. Yes, you should be able to register on the link that is attached to this video. So, let's get started with part 2 of Calvin Coolidge. So this is part 2 of a man that Ibram X. Kendi put as number 2 on his list of most racist presidents in the United States. Yesterday, we discussed his relationship with Black people. I mean, he was all right. He wasn't harmful, right? He was a proponent of Black education, lover of Howard University, right? Let's discuss his relationship with Native Americans. So, it is my personal opinion that he fetishized, I pronounced that wrong, Native Americans, and this is based on his tenuous, I have Native American blood claim, okay? He claimed he was descended from Native Americans. Coolidge claimed that he was descended from Native Americans on his father's side. He said in his autobiography that there was a marked trace of Indian blood. Coolidge hosted Native Americans at the White House numerous times. He publicly released posed photographs with them and even visited Native American tribal reservations in South Dakota. He was constantly taking pictures with Native Americans. In my opinion, it was low-key creepy. That's just my opinion. But I'm not the only one who thinks so. Colleen Shogan, Senior Vice President and Director of the David M. Rubenstein Center, wrote, throughout his presidency, Coolidge demonstrated an unusual interest in Native American affairs, but not all his activity was welcomed by Native Americans. Okay, she didn't use the term creepy, but you get my point, right? Okay. He sympathized with the plight of Native Americans, but he maintained an assimilationist attitude. On June 2nd, 1924, partially in recognition of thousands of Native Americans who joined the military during World War I, Coolidge signed the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. The act finally granted citizenship to Native Americans who lived in this country long before white men even knew that this country existed. The audacity! Finally being made citizens of a country that had been your home before the invaders even set sail for it. The nerve! The absolute nerve! But I digress. Okay. It allowed them to keep tribal land and cultural rights. In 1924, we have to keep in mind that 125,000 of the approximately 300,000 Native Americans in the United States remained non-citizens, and it was those non-citizens that became citizens. There was a small catch: the right to vote. We all know there was a silly little thing called the 15th Amendment that granted all men the right to vote regardless of race or color or previous servitude. And then we've got the 19th Amendment that gave the right to vote to women. But guess what? These amendments did not apply to Native Americans at the time because they were not considered citizens. And when the Indian Citizenship Act was passed, it did not include the right to vote. You heard me correctly. It did not include the right to vote. The right to vote was left up to the individual states. And the individual states were like, well, you're wards of the government, so what do you need the right to vote for? Until 1957, some states barred Native Americans from voting. It would not be until 1965 before Native Americans would be able to vote without harassment or hindrance. And do we want to talk about Calvin Coolidge taking sacred Lakota Sioux land and putting up a vanity project called Mount Rushmore? We want to discuss that later? Okay, respect. Speaking of the Lakota, August 4th, 1927, Coolidge was inducted into the Lakota tribe by Henry Standing Bear, Chauncey Yellow Robe, and his daughter Rosebud at Deadwood, a historic mining town. After the induction to the Lakota tribe, Coolidge attended the dedication of the Mount Rushmore site in the Black Hills, located on Lakota Sioux land that the federal government had seized from indigenous people. They just took it. It was sacred. Yeah. Coolidge's speech did not mention that they were on stolen land. Land that they just took from the very tribe he was inducted into. Not bitter. I'm bitter. Anyway, he then goes to a Lakota tribe called Pine Ridge and was asked to assist with their disputed land claim concerning the Black Hills. Instead of helping, Coolidge spoke of the Indian Citizenship Act and other policies geared at assimilation, such as land allotment, boarding schools, and English literacy. No, he didn't address the disputed land claim. Yeah, like the presidents before and after him, Coolidge believed that Native Americans would improve their lot in life through assimilation and that it was the federal government's responsibility to make that happen. He prevented Native Americans from submitting land claims and repeatedly vetoed bills that would have provided legal standing to tribes aiming to sue for land reparations. All of those pictures he took with Native Americans, it was to cultivate his public media image. The landscape was changing for American presidents, and it was rapidly becoming an office heavily reliant upon cultivated images and press coverage. So he wanted to make it appear as though he was for all people, including Native Americans. He didn't want you to see what was going on behind the curtain, which was nothing. If you read Ibram X. Kendi's article, 11 Most Racist Presidents, and we discussed this article a couple days ago, it will tell you that Calvin Coolidge signed arguably the most racist and ethnocentric immigration act in history, an act championed by Republican eugenicists and Democratic Klansmen. The Immigration Act of 1924 was indeed eugenicists inspired and was designed to limit all immigration to the United States, specific immigration to the United States. It prohibited immigration from Asia and Africa. Immigrants from China had been barred since 1882? With the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And this law expanded that ban to include many other Asian countries. The Act of 1924 eliminated immigration from Japan. It also shut out many European Jews and other refugees fleeing the Holocaust and fascism. Let me elaborate. Coolidge signed the Immigration Act of 1924, further restricting immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, severely restricted African immigrants, and banned the immigration of Arabs and Asians. America must be kept American, President Coolidge had said during his first annual message to Congress in 1923. An opinion piece in the New York Times and written by Senator David Reed, an author of the Immigration Act, was titled "America of the Melting Pot Comes to an End." It was co-authored by Washington Congressman Albert Johnson, well schooled in theories of yellow peril, and rationalized discrimination against West Coast Asians for decades. The bipartisan measure further restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, severely restricted African immigrants, and banned, we talked about that. The Immigration Act of 1924 was co-authored by Washington Congressman Albert Johnson, who was well schooled in theories of yellow peril that had rationalized discrimination against West Coast Asians for decades. The bipartisan measure further restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. The 1924 Act also tightened the national origins quota system. The Act gave 85% of the immigration quota to Northern and Western Europe, and the other 15 went disproportionately to Eastern and Southern Europe. What's missing? What countries or continents are missing? The Act found support from eugenicists, nativists, and xenophobic groups, as well as the KKK. And America Must Remain America was not only in the inaugural speech of 1923, it was also something that Calvin Coolidge said when he signed the Immigration Act into law. Yeah. He would go on to say that the United States should assist and help immigrants who come to the country and urged immigrants to reject race hatred and prejudice. Interesting. Because you've just locked out a good portion of immigrants based on your quota system. And that's based on hatred, so I'm confused by that sentiment. For all the flowery platitudes, I'm confused. I might have to do this one again. Calvin Coolidge was, Calvin Coolidge was useful to Howard University. Calvin Coolidge passed one act that was toothless for Native Americans. Because how useful is it to be a citizen if you cannot partake in the political process? And he enacted the most harmful, racist, xenophobic immigration act that resonates to this day, that Trump wanted to reenact. Calvin Coolidge, everybody. Calvin Coolidge. That's all I got to say. I mean, what else is there to say? No wonder he made the 11 most racist presidents. I'm surprised he was number 10. I would have at least made him number 5.